In this video, I'm going to show the assembly of the new TouchDRO enclosure. It's a little different than what Yuri shows on his site. Some of the parts have been updated, so I thought I'd put together a video showing it, how it goes together. For the first step, I'm just going to do an inventory. So we've got the front plate, and it's engraved. It looks backwards, but that's because it's engraved on the other side. That's the top plate. The front plate, which is with the DB9s. The back plate says back on it. Also has, that's for the USB. You have a left and right plate and the bottom plate. And you also have 4 of these top, these will receive the screws for the top, a couple standoffs for the bottom, this little piece which will hold the nuts for the DB9 connector, and this little piece that will support the board, as well as a little hardware pack, which this we're not going to need right now. So the first thing I'm going to do is just a little bit of a test fit up to make sure we know where everything goes. It's not entirely obvious. So some of these are labeled. We've got the back to back, and they will go together like that. This is not labeled, but it is the front. So you can put that together, and right and left are pretty obvious. Get all that slotted together, and it will kind of hold itself in place. You might need to flip some of the pieces around to get them to line up right. They're not entirely symmetrical. And one thing that's handy is a couple of rubber bands, and just to hold things together while you get it figured out. So that all fits together like that now. The other pieces are a little less obvious. You've got these pieces which go under here, and they will support the board, as well as give it a place for the screws to attach. This piece is relieved to hold the nuts on the bottom for the DB9 connectors. And then this piece is the board support for the back, and you see it's got a little cutout for the micro USB input. So that goes in there, and these all will just slot, these little standoffs slot underneath there. The hole should line up, and those line up there. And then finally, these little pieces for the supporting the lid will slide in there. They're a little tricky to get in, especially with the paper on both sides. Those might not be able to test fit, but we will just leave those aside for now. They'll go in when the paper is removed. And then lastly, the top will go on. And that's how your enclosure will look when it's all completed. Of course, I've got that top on upside down because I messed that up, but you will see the engraving will be right side up because it's underside, engraved on the underside. So that's your test fit. Now you know how everything goes together. Next we'll go off and peel all this protective paper off and then actually fit it up. One more thing before we take all the protective paper off, just to show how the board fits in. The USB power jack end goes in the back, and it kind of slides in, and then the front just drops down, and you see these holes will line up with the holes in those standoffs. And then you've got, in the hardware pack, you've got some standoff screws that will be used to secure that. That's all. It just slides right in. It's only held in by these 2 screws and this piece in the back that just holds it down. All right, for the next part, we've taken off all the protective coverings, which was tedious, not difficult, just tedious, especially around all this lettering. It tends to stick in these little grooves, but you can just take your fingernail and scratch it out of there. And of course, whether it matters to you is up to you. This is obviously going to be stuck on the back of a mill or some other machine and may not care what it looks like. So we've gotten back to the basic box assembly. Got the rubber bands around it and just popped it out, and just make sure everything lines up. and all the little bits and pieces of the covering are out of the way. Now, it's important to get these corner pieces in before you start gluing it up, because once the bottom is glued, you can't do this. You can't move the sides out of the way to get this in very easily, or at all. So these all go in before everything gets glued. These other pieces can go in afterwards, the standoffs and such, but the basic box and the corner pieces need to all be done in one fit up. One thing suggested in the instructions is take some toothpicks and put them around the corners so any glue that seeps through doesn't stick to the rubber bands and kind of bond the rubber bands to your part. So you're just going around, tilt that up, just kind of getting it off those corners where the grooves meet up and the glue might seep through. On the instructions, they only use one toothpick on each corner, but toothpicks are cheap, and 2 is a little extra insurance, maybe not necessary. Now, this is not, the recommended glue is acrylic cement, which I could not find locally. You can order it online, or maybe you'll get lucky finding it locally, but super glue is listed in the instructions as being okay, and I could find that at my local super cheap Harbor Freight. So hopefully this works. So we're just going to go around and glue the bottom in with not a lot of glue. It's shouldn't need a lot, just a little bead. And you don't want a big buildup because these parts will be fitting in there. Oh, I'm already gluing my fingers together. Will be fitting in there. And a big fillet of glue might cause a problem. So we'll just go around a little bit, and it should kind of suck right in there. And this is, of course, not too structural. You don't want it to fall apart, but it's not going to take much to hold it together. Just spread it all around and it should seep in there. And similarly, I want to come up the sides a little bit and hit these screw plates here. I'm kind of winging this. I have not done this enclosure before, so hopefully this all works out. It should be fine. Again, none of this is super critical in my opinion. All right, so that's a bunch of glue all around there. Let's sit for just a minute and take a look and see if there's any spots that were missed. Didn't get a lot, like this spot didn't really get much. Sorry, I'm trying to keep it on camera here. And probably best to make sure the corners have a good amount. All right, I think that will do it. And make sure it's all pressed together. And put this aside for a minute. All right, we're going to let that dry up and take the rubber bands off and see how it holds. This is all glued up. You can see I took the rubber bands off. I did get a spot where the rubber band, even despite the toothpicks, it must have slipped off. It stuck a little bit, but it's not too bad. Super glue seems to do not quite as nice of a job as the acrylic cement might, but it will do it. It will hold together, and it's pretty sturdy. Nothing pops out. And so the next part is to get these standoff pieces in. So I'm going to start with this piece, which goes for the D9 connector. Sorry, this is all black on black. So you just shut that in there and make sure the hex portions, that's really hard to see, are lining up with where the nuts will be. And you can use I have a pick here, you can use this to press it in. There is a bit of a fillet from the super glue, so if that's a problem, you can sand down the bottom of the bottom corner of the standoff you're putting in, or scrape away the fillet. I think for this one it'll be fine. This one's not super critical, so I'm just going to go ahead and glue this in as it is. Same as before, just run a nice bead of this. I hate super glue. Down and around the corners. I would avoid putting any in where the actual nuts will go, because that will take up space and make them possibly not fit. So I'm going to just do all around there. And again, this isn't even structural, it's just keeping the nuts from turning. So it's really just got to be in there, not to fall out. All right. So we can move on to the next one now. This one's a little more important that it sits in there. So I'm going to take this dental pick and just kind of see if I can. Oh, this glue's still a little dry in those, wet in those spots. So just going to smooth it out a little bit to kind of get rid of that fillet. I'm surprised this hasn't cured yet. I guess not in the spaces, the tight spaces. All right, so not entirely sure what the best order is, but I'm going to go ahead and put these in. Actually, I'll make sure to scrape a little bit down the side. And you see the super glue kind of discolored the acrylic in a few spots, but it's all on the inside, so it won't be seen, even if you do care about that. All right, so let's put these in. And we want to make sure these holes line up with the holes through the bottom plate. I'm going to try and get these all in at once. And then make sure this slot lines up with the hole for the USB connector. And that one's kind of a tight fit. Squish it down, make sure it goes down all the way. Yeah, that actually hits. Doesn't go down all the way on top of that standoff. So that's all in the right place. I think the important parts are that these holes are lined up so the bolts can go through, and then just this, you can see it through the plate. That is lined up to make room for the USB. All right, I'll hit that with some glue. Ooh, that's a big, let's spread that around. Accidentally over squoze there. And again, these are not providing structure, so you're just holding them in place. This will be clamped down even by the board bolts. So I'm also not going to put any glue on the top of this, just so it does not interfere with the board. So I think that's it there. And I'm just going to get a little bit in this corner here and here, and again, try not to interfere with the board, but holding that in place. All right, I put this devil's glue away. All right, I think that is it for the assembly of the enclosure. I'll let that dry for a while, and then we'll start on the board and connector assembly. And just here you can see what it looks like. I'm not going to push that in. Don't want it to stick yet.